What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all the stats of every one of the weapons in Black Ops Cold War's multiplayer. And in today's episode, we're going to be covering the new pistol that was just released. This is the AMP63. Now just a quick disclaimer, since there's always some confusion here, this video is focused around multiplayer only, not Warzone. The stats are very different in Warzone. I will be covering that most likely for tomorrow's video, but today's is entirely focused on multiplayer. And starting it off, as always, let's get into our damage profile, which is 3327, meaning this is going to be a 5 to 6 shot kill, and there are also no body multipliers with this. As for headshots, we get a pretty standard headshot multiplier at 1.4, which takes our headshot damage profile to a 4637, and what this means is no matter what the range, you need at least 2 headshots mixed in with body shots in order to reduce the number of shots to kill. So it's not too great in the headshot department, but moving on to rate of fire, this is 652 rounds per minute, which is fairly slow actually. And what this means for our time to kill potential is up close in the maximum damage range, our time to kill is 368 milliseconds, which is quite slow for this game. It's actually tied for being the slowest killing full auto gun in the entire game with the Krig 6. But it is worth mentioning, if you manage to land those 2 headshots up close mixed in with body shots, therefore reducing it to a 4-shot kill, we can get a time to kill potential of 276 milliseconds, which is now much more competitive with something like an SMG up close. But moving on to our bullet velocity, this is very slow at just 259 meters per second. It's not the worst in the pistol category, but all of the pistols are pretty bad in this area, and this means if you are trying to stretch the range out at all, you're going to have some issues. As for our ranges, our 5-shot kill range extends out to 19 meters, which really isn't all that bad as a pistol at least. When you consider this as a secondary weapon, that's a pretty decent range value I find. But of course you can increase that with certain barrel attachments, and if you are using suppressors, it will decrease your damage ranges. As for hardcore game modes, our base 1-shot kill potential is again just 19 meters. However, if you use the task force barrel, which boosts our damage, that actually makes it so this is a 1-shot kill at all ranges in hardcore modes. So if you are a hardcore player and want to use this pistol, make sure you use the task force barrel. Next up, let's dive into Hipfire, and as you can see here, it does have the worst Hipfire spread out of all of the pistols, and that makes sense since it is a full auto compared to the others, which are either semi-auto or burst. Then taking a quick look at idle sway, which really isn't super important for pistols because this mainly just applies for really precise long-range shots. But in either case, you can see there's definitely a bit of sway there that could throw off a long-range precise shot, maybe in hardcore modes. And now let's get into recoil. The recoil on this gun is quite interesting. It kicks pretty strong upward and to the right initially, and then it suddenly corrects itself and kicks back to the left, and then there's some downward recoil mixed in there as well at some point. So it's quite unpredictable. But having said that, in my experience at least, I don't have that much of an issue controlling the recoil on this gun, as long as I'm not trying to challenge somebody well beyond the effective range of this gun. If I'm keeping myself within that 20 meters or so, I generally don't have an issue with the recoil on this. But after that, let's move into our handling stats, and our aim down sight time is 225 milliseconds, which is pretty standard for a pistol, and then our stated sprint out time is 300 milliseconds, and in a very rare case here, our experienced sprint out time in game is the same as the stated sprint out time at 300 milliseconds, which by the way is quite slow for a pistol. I would have expected a pistol to have a much better sprint out time than this. Now, as for our reload add time, this is 1.42 seconds, which is pretty quick. That's not bad at all. And then you can also see all the various magazine attachments here. It's worth noting the standard magazine capacity is 15 rounds, and the biggest magazine we can get is just 25 rounds. But finally, for base stats without attachments, our movement speeds are pretty standard for a pistol. We've got 100% base movement speed, 142% sprint movement speed, and our aim down sight movement speed is quite solid at 90%. You still maintain a very good strafe speed while aiming down sight. So now that we have the base stats out of the way, let's have a look at our strengths and weaknesses. And when it comes to the strengths of this, it's full auto, and therefore it's really easy for anybody to use. If you don't have a very good trigger finger with semi-autos, you can just use a full auto, and that's no problem. Additionally, it's got a decent range for a pistol. Like I said, I think that's pretty solid. If you're using this as a pistol, you probably shouldn't be challenging anybody beyond 20 meters or so anyway, so I think that's great. And then finally, the movement speed values are excellent, which is what we would expect out of a pistol. As for our weaknesses though, this has a very slow time to kill. You're going to be losing a lot of face-to-face gunfights against people that are using SMGs, for instance, up close. You're just simply not going to stand a chance against an equally skilled player using an SMG. Additionally, it's got a slow bullet velocity, so you can't really stretch that range out too much against moving targets. And I just find it's really hard to deal with multiple enemies, and this is due to its slow time to kill, and also due to the fact that you burn through these small magazines very quickly. Now, before we get into the recommended attachments for this gun, I did want to talk about the Task Force barrel, because this is the one that boosts your damage, and this will boost your damage profile up to 3428, which, like I said earlier, this means it'll always be a one-shot kill in hardcore modes. However, in core modes, it doesn't change the number of shots a kill to the body. And when we factor headshots into the equation, it turns out this doesn't even help with headshots at close ranges. In your maximum damage range, this isn't going to help with headshots, but it does make it so at long ranges, you only need one headshot mixed in with body shots to get a 5-shot kill instead of 6. Now, the big downside to using the Task Force barrel is this massively increases your recoil, and as you can see here, it kicks really strong upward to the right at the beginning, and this is quite difficult to control if you're dealing with someone that's using cover or isn't at like point blank range. And as a result, outside of hardcore game modes, I would strongly advise against the Task Force barrel. If it were to help with headshots in the max damage range, sure, I would say go for it, but it doesn't even help with that. So just stay away from the Task Force barrel, at least in multiplayer. But finally, let's have a look at the recommended attachments I've got for you guys with this pistol. And I'm going to show you guys two different setups. The first setup here is if you're running the single pistol without the akimbo attachment. And with this, I'd go with the sound suppressor just because it's nice to stay off the radar and I don't want to lose too much damage range by using the agency suppressor, so just the standard one is fine. Then I use the reinforced heavy barrel. This is mainly to help with bullet velocity as well as to correct that range drop off that we get from the standard suppressor, so we still maintain about a 20 meter max damage range, which is pretty solid. Then after that, we've got the steady aim laser, and the reason I'm using this one instead of the 5mW laser is I'm actually trying to manage the aim down sight time a little bit so it's not too slow. So it's nice to have that slightly better hip fire. Then for our magazine attachment, I'm simply going for the biggest magazine possible at 25 rounds. But that does hurt our aim down sight time a decent amount, which is why I'm also going to be using the speed tape. And the reason I'm using the speed tape instead of something like the serpent wrap or the airborne elastic wrap is our sprint out time is pretty bad with this gun, especially for a pistol, and I just don't want to make it any worse. So that's why I'm just going with the standard speed tape, which for this build will give us an aim down sight time of 236 milliseconds, which is nice and snappy, which is what we want. As for the second build I've got for you guys, and this is the one that I would actually recommend using once you unlock everything, this is using the dual wield attachment. And then with this, we're going to be using the agency suppressor since it doesn't really matter that much that we're reducing our damage range since we can't aim down sight anyway. Then we're once again using the reinforced heavy barrel just because this one gives us a nice balance of range and bullet velocity. And honestly, if you're going akimbo, there aren't very many attachment choices to go with here, so might as well just go with that one. Then we're using the 5mW laser for the tightest possible hipfire spread, and we don't care about our aim down sight time. And then finally, for our magazine attachment, I'm going to go with the Salvo 22 round fast mag. And the reason for this is you get a very, very fast reload time. And since we've got one pistol in each hand, it's okay that we don't have the full 25 round magazine, because if you think about it as a dual wield, you've got 44 rounds at your disposal at any given time, and I'd just rather have that fast reload, and I don't need to worry about hurting my aim down sight time with this. So yeah, if you've got everything unlocked, this is how I would run it, but if you don't, then I would probably go with the previous setup that I had for you guys, where it doesn't have the dual wield attachment. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the AMP63. As for my thoughts on this gun, I think it is pretty terrible until you get it as a dual wield pistol. And then even then, it's not like incredibly overpowered or anything, it's just sort of balanced. And while there is a big part of me that wishes that this was a bit more powerful and a bit more effective as a single gun without using dual wield, at the same time, I'm really happy that they didn't bring in a completely overpowered full auto pistol. I much prefer them bringing it in being too weak to start off with, and then maybe they can buff it a little bit down the road, rather than bringing it in being way too powerful and then having to nerf it down the road. But of course, those are just my thoughts. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of this new full auto pistol so far in Cold War's multiplayer? Do you think it's really good, really bad, or just sort of average? Let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.